Now let's go up, and if you remember, some other points that were needed were that we need to have the ability to have other files. So this is going to be index, but we also want to have that about page, if you remember that. So I'm going to say new file about HTML. And so now inside of here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add that HTML snippet here, and I will get rid of the ones that aren't needed. And then inside of here, I'll just say about me. And then let's add a heading here. And now let's do a H2, which means it's going to be very similar to the first heading we saw. It's just going to be a little bit smaller. And I'll just say about me coming soon. Eventually we'll add more to this. And now if you switch over to the browser, hit open again, now you can see we have this other file. If I open it up, it says about me coming soon, but it's a little bit smaller. So that's kind of what a heading tag represents. So this no longer has anything because we got rid of that H1. So that is the majority of our structure. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to add some styles. So as you may have noticed, we have a lot of styles going on here. We have all kinds of things that help with alignment, with colors, with sizing images. That's all done by CSS. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a CSS file that our entire application is going to be able to use. So let's go back to our home page, and I'm also going to close out of the about because we're not going to use that one for a while. And now in the body, I am going to just have another placeholder here. This time I'm going to say dot, and then from there let's just say placeholder because it doesn't really matter. We'll get rid of this in a second and say I'm in a div. Now, what a div does is it gives you the ability to place components on the page. So even if you're in VS Code and you hover over it, even gives you a little summary of what a div is. What a div is it's an HTML element that allows you to properly manage all of the elements on the page. So if you want to put some content or an image or anything like that in a specific spot on your site, then placing it in a div gives you the ability to not only organize the code, but also to select it. You're going to be seeing a lot of what I call and what is called selecting as we go through this course. So right here I say I'm in a div, and I said this has a class of placeholder. When we say we have a class, this means that this gives us the ability to now select this placeholder. So in other words, it gives us kind of like a benchmark or a target on the page that we can go and we can say, okay, I want to go and I want to grab this value. So, and I gave you the cool little shortcut where you could say placeholder like that, but in case you're not using a text editor that allows for that, you can just type all that out manually. So you can say div class equals, and then we'll say another class here. And here I'll say I'm in another class. So now let's hit save, and I'm going to refresh this. You can see where it says I'm in a div, and now it says I'm in another class. So both of those are there, but if you right click and click on inspect, what you'll see now is you actually see the code, and this is the browser developer tools. So Chrome has this, Firefox has it, pretty much all of them have it. I personally prefer what Chrome offers, but this gives you the ability to take a look at the code, and as you're going to see, it also gives you the ability to test out styles, which is very helpful. There are many times when I'm building out websites that I'll spend quite a bit of time just adding styles and working through the developer tools here before I go back and actually apply the changes. Now, if you do make any of those changes here, just know these are not permanent whatsoever. So for example, if you went to google.com here, you can right click on this button, so that little Google search button right here, and you see where it has a bunch of height items where it says, okay, height is 36 pixels. Well, you can say, well, what would it look like if that wasn't the case? Or what would it look like if this was actually 236 pixels? Now, you may, right here, if you've never done any kind of web development or whatever, you may think that I just changed Google's code. That is not accurate whatsoever. This is only the code that was sent to the browser. So whenever we went to google.com, that server sent us the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code. When it's here in the browser, we can do anything we want with it, but that doesn't change it for anybody else. So this is simply the browser developer tools allowing you to make changes. And so that's something that as you start building out websites, you'll discover is quite handy. So what I want to do, the whole reason why I'm adding these little placeholder items here, is I want to add some CSS styles and I want to make sure they're working. So let's now switch back to the code. And I'm going to come to index and I'm going to type out link, and then you also can obviously type this out manually. I'm simply doing this to save time. And so from here, I'm going to say styles.css. Hit save. And so now what we have to do is create this file here. So I'm going to come here and create a new file. Make sure that this is typed exactly the same way. So if you say style instead of styles, then it's not going to know where to find it. So I'm going to say styles, and so this is going to give me a new file here. And now what I can do is I can use CSS to select elements on the page and then make changes to those styles. So let's test this out. The way that you can select an item, if it is a class, so right here, you can see that we have two classes where it's a class with placeholder, a class of another class. The way you select it is with a period and then the name. So I'm going to say dot placeholder. And now what I can do is let's just test it out by saying background color is red. And then now let's come here and let's pick out our another class. And this is case sensitive. So if I did something like another class, this would not work. And so now what I can do is let's add something else. So this is going to be light sea green as the background color. So now if I come back here and hit refresh, you can see that that has applied the styles. So what has gone on right here, and you can see it's placed inside of the developer tools as well. So what's gone on is the CSS file was added, and you can click on head here and you can see that now we have this styles CSS file. Inside of that file, we have a couple selectors. One found that there was a class named placeholder, and then it said, for that placeholder element on the page, I want you to apply a background color of red. Then it found a style rule that said, if you find a class called another class, then I want you to make the background color on that light sea green. And that's exactly what it did. So we now know, because of that, we now know that that is working and our architecture is all set up. Now, just in case you're curious on what would happen if you say you had the wrong file name, so I just changed that to style. Now hit refresh, and those styles are gone. Now in the head, it still has this call, but now it's pointing to a file that doesn't exist. So that was a whole reason why I added those placeholder items here, even though we're not going to use them, is because without them, then we wouldn't be able to be 100% certain that the styles were getting applied properly. And now the final item that we need to have all of our architecture done is to add the images. You may have noticed if you go and look at the final version here, you may have noticed that we have these 12 images. Well, those don't come out of thin air. So I'm going to add those directly